How many times do you get the opportunity to ask a CEO for their leadership lessons? I'll hazard a guess, not very often. And how many of these CEOs are women? As the Fortune Global 500 reports, the number of female CEOs on their list hit a record high of 4.8% last year. I'd say it's a staggering rarity. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Emanuela Trentin, Group CEO of Siram Veolia in Milan. Welcome to In Good Company. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you to you, and hello, everybody.
Well, it's a delight to have you here, and I'd like to start, as we do with all of our guests on this podcast, by asking you to tell us about yourself in 60 seconds.
Wow. I have a degree in engineer, and I underline that because I think it's important for my career. It was a choice that was key, in my opinion, because be a leader, a woman leader, has some difficulties, and starting with a degree that typically is not a female degree is something that is a first step important. Then I spent my career as a human resources, or almost the most time of my career. And then in 2019, I had the opportunity to become the CEO of Siram Veolia. Thanks to the vision of my boss, that is Estelle Brachianoff, that is a woman, that became the CEO of Veolia Group, a listed company in France, that decided to choose me and to give me this opportunity.
And I'd love to expand more on your journey into becoming a CEO. So you mentioned there that you started off in HR. Do you think there's been key skills that you've kind of learned through working in HR that's helped you become to the leadership position that you now have?
Yes, in my journey, the things that is important, I never stop on the role that as was defined, so the precise role. But I always try to give my contribution, also giving and going a little bit outside the defined perimeter. So trying to understand more the company, the business of the company, and give my views a little bit on everything, especially on human resources, but not really stopping on the street perimeter, but trying to do more and more.
And have there been any particular challenges that have kind of that you've kind of had to overcome to kind of get you to the point where you now are? Like, has there been any challenges that stick out in your mind?
But the things is that usually when you try to do this or take this approach, you always find someone saying, this is not in your perimeter, so please stay in human resources or stay in your role. But what I always explain is that's anyway in my role, and this is my contribution. So not really to stop with the people that you can meet and that can try to stop you or limit your possibilities.
And you mentioned your boss there, the CEO of the wider group, and I'm curious to kind of know about the importance of role models. So presumably she was in the CEO position of the wider group first, and then allowed you. So how important was it to you that she, being a female CEO, was she a role model in any way, or have you had any other kind of role models that have kind of helped you get on your way?
But in terms of woman leadership, I have two role models. One was negative and one was positive.
Okay.
So the first one that I met in my life was a CEO, was a woman. but was a negative role model because through working for this person, I understood perfectly what kind of leadership I would never exercise. That was a leadership very close to the typical man leadership. So it was a woman playing as a man. That, in my opinion, is a total failure, because as a woman, we must stay and remain a woman and give our contribution, leveraging on the typical female approach. That is the real value added that we can bring on business. The other one was for sure my boss, that is a positive role model, a successful woman, but maintaining really her approach. So a real person, not playing a role.
So I'm curious to kind of dig a little bit into that, if I may. So so there's a couple of things I would like to unpack, which is, one is that what sort of behaviors, stereotypically, what sort of behaviors do you think could there be less of and more of? And I suppose that's part one of that question. And the other is, what does good look like? So what, in an ideal world, would you like to see in 5 years' time, or sooner, or longer? What do you think would be the perfect world, the perfect balance?
In my opinion, the perfect balance between men and women, or generally speaking, diversity, is a perfect balance. Means that we are starting some years ago with a lot of men and few women. Now a little bit more women. We don't have to exceed in woman and some men. So, in my opinion, the value added of a team is to have the most representation of diversity, men and women, but also other, with the perfect balance. In theory, should not be one of the gender be the overcoming the other, because the value creation is due to the fact that you interact, and every people can bring his views or his approach, his behavior, his characteristics. So this is my hope for the future.
Well, and I mean, I know the where we got that stat from, the 4.8% of the global Fortune 500 companies. 4.8% is still hugely low, even in this day and age. So it still seems like a massive challenge to kind of bring that number up to a more equal number of CEOs. So long, hopefully, may that continue. I was struck by a recent LinkedIn post of yours where there was you on a panel of 7, where you are the only female on that. So that was kind of the visual representation of what we've just been talking about. So I was really interested by that.
I was the panda.
yeah. That's one way of putting it, for sure. Well, let's move on to then the more, I guess, bigger picture challenges. So obviously in 2023, the climate crisis is something that's no business leader can ignore. And we recently did a survey of over 500 sort of global CEOs and lead and senior executives, and 34% of that survey said that environmental responsibility was one of their biggest challenges. How do you agree? How does that land with you? Would you say a similar thing?
But my opinion on that is that, for sure, the declaration of almost everybody and all CEOs is that sustainability is a key point in their program. But there's a lot of greenwashing, and I can say it for sure, because sustainability is our business, And I know, having the management of many customers, that sometimes are words or a declaration, but not so often they act then for sustainability. The woman in leadership, I think, can really bring an important push on that. Why? Because, in my opinion, women think always on a on the long period. We are used to plan for the future, because we think always on the future of our children's and so on. And sustainability is a matter not on a short period, so not results for the quarter, but is a matter of doing things today for having an impact in the future, in 3-5 years of the plan. So I think really there's a lot of things to do on that, to move from declaration to action.
Yeah.
And I think that woman leadership can bring really an effort on that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, I think it'd be really interesting to see as that number grows of women in senior positions, leadership positions, such as yourself, to see how much more how much more action gets taken towards tackling the climate crisis. So that's a really interesting point. With that in mind, then, what would you say is the best thing that you're doing as a leader right now in that space?
The things that I did recently is the strategic plan of my company, differently from the other one. I built it together with my team, so my executive team, but also involving the company.
Mm-hmm.
So the middle management and communicating to everybody. I think that today, to be leader, you need to involve others, to let them understand the direction, but also to ask them to work with project, with concrete actions on the program. Otherwise, you will never achieve your objectives. For two reasons. The first reason is that the world is changing a lot and continuously.
Yeah.
So we need to change in a continuous way. The second is that when you have to change, you cannot do it by yourself. So a top-down approach doesn't work in this world of today. You need really to have the other on board with you, all together believe and have the same value. Otherwise, you will never get the future that you have in mind.
Yeah.
The future is something shared with all the other.
We run, with a lot of our clients, we run something that we call Story Shaker, which is all about leadership approaches. And so within that, we have 4 stories, essentially. And story 4 is very much aligned with what you've just said. So not a top-down approach, bringing in thinking from all over an organization, and also that thinking much more about the knock-on effects of actions that take place within, so yeah, it's very much. It was interesting hearing you speak there and seeing how aligned that you are to that there, which obviously I am not personally an expert in, but many people at Impact are that could go through that one. So thank you.
Now then, just to add one thing, that the leader then has to be the leader and the decision maker.
Sure.
Because otherwise the other could be a little bit lost, no?
Of course,
because if everything is on the hands of the people or the middle manager, then they said, okay, but
yes, of course,
what is the meaning of having a leader?
There's still got to be some accountability, hasn't there? For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, then, here's probably a bit more of a personal question. You, especially with your HR background, you have helped other people develop their careers, but all of that, I guess, comes through learning and through experiences to get you to that point. What would you say has been your most memorable learning experience throughout your career?
It was a failure. Because when I was young, I was in Pirelli. I was nominated as leader of a big project of M&A, and I failed. And I failed. Why? Because I was not sure of my capabilities and possibilities, and so I didn't believe on that and on my possibilities. And in fact, I failed. Because if you are not the first one to believe in what you are doing, the other one for sure will not. And this was the big achievement and the big things that I learned.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I suppose that probably stuck with you, possibly not in a good way, but also in a bad way as well, right? That you had the kind of negative experience, but it allowed you to kind of learn from that. So, yeah, that's really interesting. With that then in mind, like what would you say to other leaders, upcoming leaders, what would your advice be to them to help them learn and kind of achieve their full potential?
First of all, always look for involving other. Be kind, but determined. Because sometimes if you are too kind, could be misleading, and people could not believe that you are able to take decision. So that you are a decision maker, that you are a leader. So determined, but gentle. The second, believe in what you're doing, in your capability to make the right choice, and ask everybody an opinion, but then the decision is yours, and you have to be sure of your decision. Maybe it's the wrong one, but it's you that decided on the basis of your opinion that you achieved through the listening of all your collaboration colleagues, collaborator or colleagues, but then take your decision on your shoulder.
I think that's some really sound advice, and I'm sure lots of people will be able to use that to be able to further their career for sure. And I suppose and this kind of answers my last question, because we always finish our podcast episodes with the same question, which is, if you were starting your career again, what advice would you give yourself? Would it be the same advice that you just gave, or would it be something different?
No, almost the same. The other one is always believe, understand what are your possibilities, and believe in that.
Well,
because as I already mentioned, if you don't believe, the other for sure will not.
Self-belief and self-assurance. I think that's something that can easily get overlooked. So yeah, I think that's some really sound advice. So thank you very much. Well, that has brought us to the end of our episode. Thank you ever so much. And I want to thank you on two levels, really. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule, really, for joining us on this podcast. But also thank you very much for doing it in English, because I think my Italian I would have definitely struggled. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for that so much. Which just leaves me to say then, if you would like to find out any more about Impact or Siram Veolia, then please do find all of the links that you need. You can connect to myself or to Emanuela on LinkedIn. All of the links that you will need are in the description. So thank you again to Emanuela for joining me today on this episode of In Good Company. And until the next time, take care.